terrible thing to say. It's not true. No, I found it fun.
Have you ever wondered if even Hollywood legends like Katharine Hepburn had secret and tumultuous love affairs? Few people know that, behind the spotlight, Hepburn was rumored to have been romantically linked to several prominent Hollywood actresses, only to later bluntly admit that she hated those she had been close to. So, who were the 5 actresses that crossed paths with Hepburn and left such profound scars? Let's dive in and uncover the story. When discussing Katharine Hepburn's life, the spotlight often shines on her fierce independence, her defiance of Hollywood norms, and her carefully cultivated public persona. Yet, beneath the layers of stardom and relentless professionalism lies a more complicated story, one woven from fleeting encounters, secret intimacies, and emotional battles with equally formidable women of her era. Their stories with Hepburn are not just gossip relics from Hollywood's golden age. They reflect the collision between private longing and the suffocating expectations of a fiercely judgmental Tallulah Bankhead, a storm too fierce to contain. Tallulah Bankhead was a woman who rarely played by anyone's rules. Known for her gravelly voice, magnetic presence, and hedonistic lifestyle, she belonged to a breed of performers who thrived as much on notoriety as on craft. By the time she crossed paths with Katharine Hepburn at an elite gathering in the late 1930s, Bankhead's reputation as a bohemian provocateur was already cemented. She was adored and feared in equal measure, a star who courted chaos with her drinking, her affairs, and her unapologetic flamboyance. Hepburn, by contrast, stood at the other end of the spectrum. Though she defied Hollywood's femininity standards by refusing to conform to glamour conventions, she was intensely guarded when it came to her private life. Where Bankhead thrived on public spectacle, Hepburn recoiled from it, keeping her emotional world behind an almost impenetrable wall of discipline and self-control. Their alleged relationship, if one may call it that, was a clash of extremes, the unrestrained fire of Bankhead against Hepburn's calculated restraint. Accounts suggest their connection was immediate, born of curiosity as much as attraction. Bankhead was drawn to Hepburn's intensity, a seriousness that contrasted starkly with the superficiality she often encountered in her own social circle. Hepburn, meanwhile, was reportedly both fascinated and unsettled by Bankhead's reckless charisma. But fascination has its limits. What began as a tempestuous affair quickly deteriorated into an exhausting struggle for balance. Hepburn, ever conscious of appearances and order, found herself overwhelmed by Bankhead's unpredictability. Years later, Hepburn is said to have referred to Bankhead as a storm of emotion I should never have walked into. The metaphor is telling. For Hepburn, Bankhead represented not just passion, but danger, the kind of force that could erode the carefully maintained discipline on which she built her career. If their paths intertwined briefly, they also diverged with the inevitability of 2 opposing forces, each unable to yield ground. Barbara Stanwyck, a mirror too unforgiving. If Tallulah Bankhead was a storm, Barbara Stanwyck was a fortress. Strong, pragmatic, and sharp-edged, Stanwyck carved her career by embodying characters who exuded resilience, independence, and a certain no-nonsense pragmatism. Her on-screen persona reflected much of her real life. A woman who endured hardship and remade herself into one of the most respected actresses of her generation. It was during the 1940s, when Hepburn was already a towering presence in Hollywood, that whispers began to circulate about a brief but intense connection between her and Stanwyck. Unlike Bankhead's relationship with Hepburn, which flared brightly before collapsing under its own chaos, the bond with Stanwyck seemed grounded in mutual recognition. Both women were strong-willed, fiercely ambitious, and uncompromising in their pursuit of excellence. They understood each other in ways that few others could. And yet, that very similarity may have been their undoing. Sources claim Hepburn once likened Stanwyck to a mirror I could not bear to look into for too long. It was an observation both profound and cruel. Stanwyck, in Hepburn's eyes, reflected too many of her own qualities: strength that bordered on hardness, determination that shaded into isolation, independence that threatened to suffocate intimacy. To love Stanwyck, then, was to confront her own vulnerabilities, an exercise Hepburn had little appetite for. The relationship, whatever form it truly took, was short-lived. What remained, however, was a lingering sense of distance and regret. Unlike with Bankhead, where rejection was rooted in incompatibility, with Stanwyck the parting seemed to come from an inability to coexist with one's own reflection. Hepburn, who spent much of her life navigating the paradox of independence and intimacy, may have found in Stanwyck the ultimate challenge. A partner too similar, too revealing, and ultimately too threatening to her carefully maintained sense of self. Greta Garbo. The allure of the unreachable few stars have ever carried the aura of Greta Garbo. Her Swedish reserve, her carefully curated mystique, and the now legendary declaration, "I want to be alone," were not mere affectations but core elements of her being. For Hepburn, drawn to women who lived outside convention, Garbo represented the ultimate puzzle. A woman whose presence was intoxicating, yet who never truly allowed herself to be possessed. Their rumored encounters, taking place in private estates in upstate New York and hidden apartments in Manhattan, were said to be steeped in secrecy. These were not fiery confrontations like with Bankhead, nor mirrored battles as with Stanwyck. Instead, they were encounters charged with silence, where intimacy was fragile and every glance carried unspoken tension. Hepburn, who could be fiercely articulate, found herself disarmed by Garbo's refusal to reveal more than she wished. Years later, Hepburn reportedly confessed in frustration, "She never let anyone truly know her. Not even me." The remark encapsulates the futility of the relationship. Loving Garbo was like chasing a shadow. The closer one moved toward her, the more she receded into the mist. And yet, it was precisely this elusiveness that made her so irresistible. For Hepburn, accustomed to control, Garbo was the one thing she could neither master nor fully understand. Joan Crawford. From rivalry to ruin. If Garbo was silence, Joan Crawford was thunder. Few actresses symbolized Hollywood's hunger for ambition more than Crawford. Her rags to riches ascent, her obsessive drive for perfection, and her unyielding competitiveness made her both admired and feared. For Hepburn, Crawford was not simply another actress. She was a rival whose career ran parallel to her own, a reminder of the relentless battles for dominance that defined the studio system. It is against this backdrop that whispers of a brief entanglement between the two women emerge. The alleged affair was never tender in the traditional sense. It was, rather, a collision of wills. Two women at the height of their power, both accustomed to shaping narratives on their own terms, briefly allowed their rivalry to spill into intimacy. In the clandestine corners of Hollywood, what began as competition reportedly ignited into attraction, fueled by the paradoxical pull between admiration and resentment. But such a bond was doomed from the start. Neither woman could concede ground. Crawford's insatiable need to dominate clashed with Hepburn's refusal to bend, and what might have been passion quickly soured into hostility. Hepburn is said to have dismissed her with biting precision. She played strong women on screen but could never tolerate facing one off it. In this sharp remark, Hepburn revealed both her disdain and her refusal to cede emotional control to someone she saw as a rival rather than a partner. The Crawford episode underscores an essential truth about Hepburn. For all her independence, intimacy with equally ambitious women often collapsed under the weight of pride and competitiveness. Judy Holliday, the protégée who walked away. If Garbo was untouchable and Crawford unyielding, Judy Holliday represented something altogether different. Hope. Younger, witty, and blessed with a sharp intelligence that belied her comedic persona, Holliday was a rising star at Columbia Pictures. Her charm lay in her blend of innocence and acuity, and for Hepburn, by then an established icon, Holliday's energy offered both refreshment and renewal. Their connection reportedly began as professional admiration. Hepburn, known for mentoring younger talents, was said to be impressed by Holliday's quick wit and ability to inhabit roles with nuance. Gradually, admiration evolved into intimacy, a relationship marked less by tempest and rivalry than by warmth and mutual respect. For Hepburn, who had navigated tumultuous affairs with powerful contemporaries, Holliday's presence offered the possibility of stability. But stability in Hollywood was rarely without cost. As whispers mounted and the dangers of exposure grew sharper, Holliday's fear of professional ruin outweighed her commitment to Hepburn. Unlike Hepburn, who by then had the clout to weather scandal, Holliday was still carving her place in the industry. The risk of losing everything proved too heavy to bear. She withdrew, prioritizing career over love. Hepburn's reported reaction was a mixture of bitterness and clarity. She chose the stage over the truth. I understood, but I could not forgive. The remark illustrates Hepburn's relentless demand for authenticity, even as she herself lived in carefully guarded secrecy. In Holliday's retreat, she confronted the painful reality that the social fabric of the time made genuine relationships between women almost impossible to sustain. Taken together, these rumored affairs sketch a portrait of Katharine Hepburn that is far more complex than the polished image Hollywood projected. She was not simply the stoic, sharp-tongued icon who rejected convention, but also a woman caught in the contradictions of her own heart, drawn to brilliance, repelled by volatility, searching for intimacy in a world that punished authenticity. The 5 women said to have crossed her path, Bankhead, Stanwyck, Garbo, Crawford, and Holliday, were not just lovers or rivals, but reflections of Hepburn's own struggles. The pull between independence and connection, ambition and vulnerability, secrecy and truth. Whether these stories are fact, embellishment, or carefully crafted rumor, they open a rare window into the hidden emotional terrain of one of cinema's greatest legends. Do you believe these clandestine romances truly shaped Hepburn's legacy? Or are they just Hollywood myths designed to intrigue? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more untold stories from the golden age of stardom.